Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to, excuse me, welcome to the 7th of our webinar series this year. And I thank you very much. I am very excited about this presentation. Every time that I go in to try and sell a tour, especially to a larger company, I'm always asked, well, does it really work? Does it make any difference? And yeah, there's that data out there. There are use cases out there where it really does make a difference. And we're going to go through sort of an accumulation of them today. And I welcome you to this IVRPA webinar. IVRPA, the International VR Professionals Association, is the only international association directed towards the creatives in our field, as opposed to just the corporate interest. And that kind of separates us and really makes us different. Let's see. One of the things that I'll mention is that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be available on the IVRPA website in the webinars section for members. It's one of the members' benefits that you get to view our whole library of webinars and other presentations. And if you aren't a member now, I highly encourage you to join, because it's for not that much money, $50 for a professional membership. You get access to that, discounts with various companies in the field, and help build a community. We have a lot of very interesting plans coming up for next year, which I'm not quite ready to go over. We'll perhaps do that in the January webinar. So anyway, I will now turn it over to Lauren and go silent, since it's definitely Lauren's show. So Lauren Ibarrando, it's over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Ibarrando. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, I'm going to go over, and I also, in the chat, I put a PDF of this. I'd recommend downloading it. Now there's...
I will mention that, apologies. If anyone wants to use the chat feature, be sure that when you enter it, the little blue button where it says "to," click on that and make sure it says "to everyone" if you want it to go to everyone. Otherwise, it only goes to the host and panelist. And Lauren has just put up the PDF. So, okay.
So I wanted to mention again, some of the graphics in this presentation are created by Firefly. This first one here of the young lady touching up into space. It's kind of a fun program to work with, and if you're doing on presentations and you don't want to have to mess around with stock imagery and things like that, it's a pretty fun tool, and it's firefly.adobe.com. So I'm going to go over the uses and effectiveness of VR, XR. I know that typically VR, virtual reality, is under the umbrella of extended reality, but I kind of pulled it out a little bit because our group is more focused on virtual reality, but we do fit within extended reality. And I think as business cases, as we go forward, you want to be aware of the ecosystem that you fit in. So the topics I'm going to go over, I want to cover the context. Where does VR, XR, sit in the space? And I'm going to use the metaverse as the dream, or what we're after here, and I'll talk about the parts, kind of the problems with this metaverse, and where we're making some progress. And it's important that you understand that virtual and augmented reality fit within much larger business cases, and that the big players like Facebook, Apple, they're going after this metaverse thing, and I'll talk about it here in a second. I'll also then talk about what are the challenges that we're seeing with adoption of virtual augmented reality in the various use cases that I'll talk to. And I'll be doing this with education, focusing on education, but it's pretty applicable to all of the fields. And I'm going to give you some use cases in education, medicine, media, and military. They're kind of the big players or drivers right now in successful uses of VR and XR. Then I'll look at, before that, I'll talk about the time to adoption horizon, where are we actually seeing these technologies coming online? So this first one, this comes out, if you're familiar with the Gartner's hype cycle, it's a graph that shows kind of the lifestyle or the life cycle of technologies, how they're introduced. And it basically gives you the, as developers, as the people closest to a technology, we're often the least likely to see its business case, to see its downfalls, the problems with it. And this Gardner hype cycle is a graph that shows where along a technology's life it is. And they usually, a technology when it's first introduced has tremendous promise, and you see it really rising up. But then there's not really a business case for it. There's not really any profitable applications to it, and it falls into what they call the trough of disillusionment. And then eventually the technology comes back and it has business cases. And that's where we're at with virtual and augmented reality. They've gone through their hype cycles. But this is called the metaverse wheel, and it's from the same organization, and it breaks the metaverse down into pieces, and they're gaming, digital humans, virtual space, shared experiences, tokened assets, and then spatial computing. Virtual augmented reality, we pretty much so fit within the virtual spaces, and the spatial computing, we kind of dance all over this wheel, but those are the two areas that we're in. And you see the inner ring from the pieces is the problems that we face with each of these areas. And just going around them quickly, for gaming, everybody's aware of this one. The content always lags behind the consoles. So good quality games are expensive and hard to come by. The digital humans that we're using, the avatars, things like that, you'll see some examples of them in this presentation. We're getting very close, but we're still a long ways away from believable, scalable avatars and representations of ourselves. Virtual spaces, the challenge has typically been that it's complex, costly to build, but we're seeing some progress in that area with photogrammetry, things like Matterport, VR cameras that are increasing, the ability to capture spaces in a single, thing. And then also the AI assisted editing that we used to spend a lot of time painting out nadir patches and things like that. And now they're being done, almost instantly for you. In spatial computing, which is how the devices operate in a space, and that can include things like an Apple Watch, HoloLens, and also haptic feedback. And again, in this presentation, wherever you see an item with a link on it, click on it, and it'll take you to what I would consider to be the best link. I did a lot of research on these. So this Meta Gloves is one of the more advanced haptic feedback devices. The other areas that one that's kind of a hidden one for us right now is the tokenized assets. And for education, which I'll get to here in just a second, once you sign a student up, once you give them a test, they get results, you start producing all of this personal information that you've got to protect. And if you can't protect it, the product just won't work. A school won't, it doesn't matter how good your VR course is. If it doesn't have, good fraud protection, it won't be used. So I'm going to move on to now the next of looking at education and looking at what the challenges. Again, this is applicable to any of the fields, medicine, military applications. They kind of all break down to these three general categories of problems, and specific for education. But the first one is a solvable problem, and that's the familiarity or fluency of both the end user for education, that's the student, or the source, in this case, instructional designers. Neither of those at a wide level, the students or instructional designers, are truly familiar with XR VR yet. And so the solution to that is what we're doing today, is webinars, educating people, getting them familiar with what the technology is and how it will be applicable to them. And that's, a solvable problem. It's something we're dealing with right now. Then you move up into a difficult level of problem, which is because this technology is so profound, it's so powerful, it isn't just an augmentation of your current processes. It eventually will change how you teach, meaning that the faculty, the infrastructure, your educational strategies, from an organizational point of view, the tools that you use will all have to change. And we're not really sure how to do that. It's a difficult problem. The last series of problems, and in homage to Hellbound Hellraiser, wicked problems are, ones where we really don't even know what the problem is or how to even solve it. And one of the ones that's one of the bigger is, and it's not a political term, but it's what they call digital equity. And it's a functional term that means, and we saw this with COVID, when you move to, all right, everybody, you're at home, we're going to do VR-based education now. You had to have compatible machines, protocols, all the bandwidths have to be there. And if you're teaching a class of 30 students and one student, there's something wrong, they don't have the right device or anything, then the whole thing goes apart. And so that, how do we achieve, the infrastructure that we can rely on this stuff? And then again, specific to education, but it would be the same for everything, because the technology is so different, so profound, the very way in which you teach will change. Pedagogy, that the science of teaching is going to have to be altered or updated for such profound technologies. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. So now looking at, given these challenges, we're making progress. What's the road to adoption timeline, or they call it a timeline horizon? When do we see these technologies coming online? This is a survey about a year or two old, and every survey that you look at, back to that Gartner hype cycle, they're overly optimistic because they're being done by developers, by people seeking funding. So it's the most optimistic look at a technology. But when does it actually start to come online? And I'm picking out for education a series of technologies here. Mobile learning and analytics are on, I think everybody would agree, they're here and they're online and they're starting to work. We're teaching people with mobile devices, and we have our last webinar, Google Analytics 4, we're deriving back useful information on that, which is critical. If you can't teach somebody, if you can't assess and gauge, measure, are they meeting the objectives, the learning objectives? And some of the interesting things that are coming out, the way in which we're changing education, talking to the paradigm shift, that you're not just replacing a book with some better type of book, you're replacing a book with some completely different thing, which brings about new changes. And I'm just going to touch a couple of them that are promising. One is what they call micro and adaptive learning. Micro is the TikTok nature, that you're breaking content up into little pieces that people digest a little bit faster. Adaptive learning is that you're able to change the course or the material in real time based upon a person's assessment, that you can start to have adaptive learning. In a course, a person's having a trouble with some concept, fractions, you're sensing that in real time and you're feeding them more fractions, or you're hammering away on what the issue is. The other one is a very big one, is the cloud computing. And what does cloud computing mean for us? This is a big one, in that cloud computing is about getting the processor off of you. I don't need you to be carrying around a computer processor anymore. Certainly don't want to be building headsets with the processor in it. I only need the display device because my internet speeds. We're at 5G. We see some work in 10G. We're reaching the point where our content, things we wear or display, are going to be just displays. With spatial positioning systems on them, but we're not going to be carrying around computers anymore or worrying about how much storage the device has. The other one is social learning, in that we're moving. One of the main problems of VR has been that it isolates students, and so you're seeing a lot of push in learning how to create content that gets people to interact with each other. And then I'm not going to go into the analytics, but because I kind of talked about it, but we have advances in that are real-time analysis that we didn't have before, the ability to follow you across devices. So I have a view of your entire path where you go and what you do, and then also the privacy. That all had to be revamped to update for new privacy requirements. Then getting into just one of the biggest areas for us that's holding us back in VR/XR is the displays, the devices, the headsets that we wear, or whether it's in some type of a cage system with a spherical display. But we're seeing some progress in that. And then I'm going to cover some of the tools that we're also seeing a lot of advances in the Unreal Engine's a big one. And then I won't cover too much, but into technologies that aren't here yet, which they will need to be if this is, VR-based education, or if it's military or industrial applications. The security of the content, so all the blockchain stuff, things like that. How do I know who you are? How do I can't create a metaverse of value if I don't have marketplaces in there, the ability for you to buy and make, purchases on that, voting, things like that. That the security is going to have to be there, or it just won't work. And then the virtual assistants, which is the advancement or the embodiment of AI into our things. And I think that'll have a profound effect on how we design virtual and augmented interfaces. We'll have the ability to control it by speech, rather than an arrow or, a hotspot. Maybe they just say, open up, or show me more, or things like that. So that'll be an important aspect, but it's definitely not here yet. Now, I'm going to get in now to the use cases or uses. And there are so many use cases spread out across this. So I've just picked out ones that I felt were very notable and were successful. They've been around for a while, but I've also embedded some in here that were successful technically, but ultimately failed business-wise. And I'll talk to the reason as to why that is, and that gets back to that, to the metaverse wheel or the problems that we're facing. So the first one for education, and it's Google Arts and Culture, which is, I think most people are aware of it. It launched in 2011, 17 museums, over 11 countries. And it was a little bit crude to start with, but it's been improving. And now they have high-res imagery in there. You can look at brushstrokes on paintings. They've opened it up to more than just museums. They have archives and libraries now, but it's grown to 2,000 museums and it's over 200 countries. I tried to find what they spend on this because they don't make money off of arts and culture. There's no revenue stream from it. So it's purely a marketing piece, or something that Google feels is important to, that they value arts and culture or whatever. So it's kind of a status symbol, if you will, for them. I know they have around 200-300 people. So it's not a small investment. So it does, to me, it kind of signifies that even though the business case isn't here yet, one of the world's biggest companies sees it as value, that we'll have this online repository of all of our arts and culture that spans everything. Now, one of the products that they had, which failed, and it's kind of an interesting story as to how it fails, is what's called Expeditions. And that was their scientific version of Google Arts and Culture. And you can see it here at the bottom right. So you had virtual tours that were science and technology, arts, geography. It was their attempt to create immersive courseware that would be used in classes. It was deactivated in June of 2021 and is now just folded into the arts and culture. You can still access it, but the app and the VR tools aren't there anymore. So why? Why did it fail? Or why did they pull it? Probably be a better way to put it. You look at the comments from it from teachers and students that used it, and it's ironic because it comes around when COVID. So COVID comes about, and teachers think, oh, we have this expedition, these virtual field trips, we'll put the students in it and go on it. The problem is that it was all headset based, and you can't support headsets if you're not there. If it's not really remote, you can't send 30 students out with headsets and not expect that they're not going to be able to connect it. Or so it didn't work. The teachers weren't able. They would have students that couldn't access the course. And, if you're a teacher trying to teach a course and two of your students, they've got some problem, you can't figure it out, you can't really go on. We taught 28 of the kids, it's good enough. That doesn't work. The other issue that they ran into, and this goes back to the metaverse wheel under gaming, one of the problems is that the content. And in this case, if you create educational content and you want it to be used in schools, it has to match the curricula and the objectives, the learning objectives. And modern education is very specific about the objectives and what they're teaching. And if your content doesn't match up with that, it tends to create more problems for the teacher. It doesn't mesh. And then also another reason that this was deactivated is just a business call by Google. And when they discontinued this expeditions, around that time, or might be a little bit further, they also discontinued their Daydream program, their version of Google Cardboard kind of stuff. They were doing some work with Samsung on that. They haven't done any investments in VR since they discontinued this, but they've been doing heavy investments into AR, to augmented reality, with their AR Core, which is a wonderful program for building AR experiences on Android devices. But I'll talk to I'll show you some of the products that they're coming out with, why they're stepping into AR. And AR has a much larger business case for it eventually than VR does. That's probably why they're doing it, just money. So now I'm going to get into a use case for medicine. And when I look for successful use cases, I saw kind of a theme that if you have a way to teach something, let's say you're going to teach a person how to do maintenance on a helicopter, and you're teaching them with a PDF or a book. If you replace that with VR-based education, and there's not a compelling case for it, maybe the helicopter maintenance wasn't dealing with spatial concepts, you weren't trying to, then the VR is no more effective than the traditional education. And given that it's much more expensive, it fails. So VR as an educational tool it's very specific to where it will work. And there's spatial cases, or there are cases where you can't like firefighting training, or you'll see a parachute training where it has to be simulated. Other than that, if it's just straight, like you want to teach fractions using virtual reality, you're not going to get any better results from it. You will get students that would want to take the gamified fractions, like, oh, hey, you teach fractions in virtual reality. I want to take that. But it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to learn any more. So be very careful about that. What the VR education has to be something that will work. Therapy is one where it works quite well, because that's an environmental condition where you're trying to teach people either pain management, behavioral, mental health type therapies. For pain management, you're teaching them about breathings, or their space. You can control the environment that they're in, a softer, more relaxing thing. And so this first company, Applied VR, they have a successful product called Ease VRX. It's used for chronic lower back pain. And if you click on the link there, I'm going to go ahead and just show you that. Throughout this presentation, as Scott had said, I tried to give you some evidence or data for why, how these things. So this is a clinical trial, a very large one, over 1,000 people in the study. And it goes through and talks, if you're a scientist, you're into data, this tells you exactly what the trial was, the sample, and what the results were. And they saw, against a dummy trial, they saw an improvement here. So VR for, oops, put the wrong one. VR for therapy is finding some good uses for it. It's taking off. However, the second company here, Pear Therapeutics, they went bankrupt just very recently. And they were definitely a pioneer in what they would refer to as digital therapeutics. So they were doing biofeedback and things like that. Why did it fail? It didn't fail from the technology not being good. It was very effective. They had all kinds of trials and studies that show that it was effective. Ironically, they failed because of their own success. Because they were successful, they went and had all kinds of products out in the market, but they misunderstood or didn't understand the industry that they were in. And in the medical industry, if you are introducing a new product, medicine, therapy, something like that, you can go through your trials, your NIH, and the drug can be approved for sale, or the therapy can be approved. But ultimately, the people who reimburse a patient for that therapy is the insurance companies. And the insurance companies don't go off of data trials alone. They go off of real world data. So unless you've got a product that has been in the market for a while, they're hesitant to reimburse it. And there was a delay in reimbursing it. You had to explain, you had to provide. So they sold all these products, had all of these, patients using these products, then submitting their insurance claims. And because it's a new technology, because of the end user, or in this case, the healthcare industry, the insurance companies weren't really familiar with VR XR. They were asking questions and wanted more studies, and Pear Therapeutics ran out of capital. So you can be successful, but you always have to remember the business case and what you're in. So point of this presentation is to areas that you might want to look at where you can pick up some business. And here's some highlights from a 2023 survey of doctors, clinicians, clinics, people dealing with therapy, pain management, behavioral, things like that. And these are the highlights. 85% of the clinicians believe that VR can have a positive impact on patients. So the majority of people in the industry recognize the value of the therapy. It's not bizarre therapy to them. 70% of respondents are familiar with VR or are using it in some form. So again, you got a lot of people that, at least in the medicine, I think it's more than in other industries, they're aware of VR as a therapy, and they're interested in it. The next one, 40% of doctors report patients asking about gamified therapy. So gamified therapy is what people were introduced with a Wii and, game controllers where you're playing tennis and things like that. Some of the biofeedback devices and things. So patients are aware of those, and they prefer that, or they want that. So you have a receptive audience for VR products in medicine. And then the last one is that 50% of the clinics have some ability to use VR with their clients in 2023. So you have a lot of clinics with devices, with infrastructure already there. They're just not the software or things. So, could you create a VR app with beautiful, sunset panoramas, things like that? I don't know, but this is an industry that is definitely receptive to VR XR as a use case, and it's proving to be effective. And again, that successful VR trial will take you to an NIH trial that goes through. The other links in here will also take you to. I chose, if I'm describing something, to include a link that talks to the effectiveness of it. How much did they spend? How much did they get back? The return on investment. So this next one is now, this isn't a media product per se, but is a tool that is a very profound tool or advancement for us. And it's I definitely recommend clicking on this Matrix Awakens. And I think I don't want to go through it, but I wanted to show you what it's about. So it's a YouTube video, and it's showing you gameplay from this. This is a tech demo.
Confront us with questions.
But you can see the level of, this is AI, this is all CGI.
Why we want to make
all the
X
fabric,
instead of
the
Y?
hair.
Where do ideas of who we are?
But you can watch that. It's a pretty amazing piece. But back to what's going on here, or what's the major advancement. And this Unreal Engine, it's a 3D gaming platform. It's a content creation tool like Unity would be. And three of the major advancements in this new product, which we'll see some some very profound games come out of it. First one's called Luminum. It's where it introduces a dynamic global illumination. In previous games like this, you would have to bake in the lighting and use light maps to mimic reflections, things like that. And you can see when you look at the footage from this game, or down below here, I've got kind of an example of, this is only over 10 years. GA5 stands for Grand Theft Auto 5, which was 10 years ago, was one of the more technologically advanced games. Also a very profitable one. But in that game, all of the interiors, if you looked inside of a building or anything, they were all just 1x1 cube maps. So just 3 or 4 images. In this new version, they're using actual 3D models, and they're able to do that by a pretty amazing technology where they're streaming in high resolution geometry. So they can populate an entire city with geometry, but only loading what you're looking at the moment. So it's very similar to how we do tiling. KR Pano does multi-resolution tiling with an image. You're seeing the same thing now with the geometry and the assets. So you don't have to worry about the polygon budget like you used to. You have to really just, gut everything down to the bare minimum to get it to run. And then the other huge advancement is you can click on it. It's the world's largest 3D warehouse or scanning warehouse, and they just scan everything in. So rather than modeling, and I'm actually going to click on it because it's kind of a neat little place, but you buy textures, models. So if you're going and you're in Unreal Engine, you're creating some type of a VR environment. In the past, you would have to model everything or go buy the model. And here you have just everything that you could possibly want is just available for you to download. And within the Unreal Engine, you're able to pull these pieces out and create with them. So we're seeing you're shifting towards a lot less mental work, a lot more creativity. You're being freed up. The AI tools will see that as well, that you're, as a creator, you're spending a lot less time doing mundane things. So let me go back to continue along my time here. Okay, so yeah, the other one is the NPCs, non-player characters. And again, this is only a 10-year difference between these two. The one on the left represents a non-player character from Grand Theft Auto 5, 10 years ago. They're not bad, but the ones in this new Matrix Awakens, you can see they've got clothing, hair, the facial expressions, the eyes and everything are much more realistic. And the really cool part is you can go online on YouTube and type in NPC conversations, Matrix Awakens. They're using an AI engine on this. And so when you come up to these characters in the game, you can actually have kind of conversations with them. And they're a little creepy. If you go online on YouTube and you watch some of these, people are talking up and they're asking these, and it's a semi-believable conversation. It's kind of wild. And these would eventually be what the virtual assistant will be. As we build more and more complex virtual tours with more and more complex features, you'll want to have more and more simplified controls, and having an Alfred or somebody who follows you around and guides you is going to be a pretty powerful feature of virtual reality. I just wanted to the items in the sky blue here talk to the promise of our industry. And if you weren't aware, on October 13th, Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion, the biggest deal in gaming history by far. And they did that, as they say, to stake their claim to a virtual future. So they're buying up the content creators, which is what we are, in this group here. So 68.7 billion. I used to work for the Navy, and I always break things out to submarines. A submarine costs, a modern, Virginia class attack submarine costs about $2 billion. And to me, it represents one of the most advanced devices or machines that humankind's ever built. And here you've got, 34 of those. it's pretty amazing. That's an amazing amount of money invested in it. So kind of makes you happy about that the industry you're working in is definitely growing. So the next one. So now getting into military applications, and I'm only including training in these. Obviously, from the news, you're aware of the first person vehicle, and how drones and everything, and the 360 surveillance now. So it's military is definitely an area where virtual and augmented reality is seeing a tremendous investments. In fact, I believe that the largest investments, if you're looking for business, it's in this realm. And so I've got just 4 that I've covered here that are examples of successful ones. And by successful, they've been around for a while. They're what the military or Department of Defense would refer to as a program of record, meaning that it has regular funding into it. The first one, and click on the links that'll take you to really good descriptions of them. And in there will be information that you're seeing in the light blue about what is the return on investment, what some of the metrics for these. The synthetic training environment is one of the largest VR projects around, and it's the U.S. Army's effort to create a fully synthetic training environment where they mix live fire with mixed reality and virtual as well, because you really kind of have to have all of them together. And for example, you probably have seen their current live fire training where they use lasers. They have their rifles, and then they wear a jacket, and they have a laser, and they'll go through this training, and they'll determine how many times you got shot or things like that. But they have problems with it in that if the environment or the representation is not accurate enough, you can inadvertently train people bad habits. And with that system, the laser firing system, they have a problem where they train soldiers to hide behind soft barriers. They know that it's a competitive environment. They're in this virtual thing. They know that if they hide behind some object and they don't get hit with the laser, they don't get hit. But the object they're hiding behind is what they would refer to as a soft barrier. It's not going to stop a bullet. And so you're training people inadvertently, a bad skill. The synthetic training environment allows them to very sophisticated, but in a CAD environment, if that laser hits a wall in a training environment, they're able to determine would that wall have stopped the bullet, and so they're able to adjust it. Go ahead and click on that and go into it. It's a pretty fascinating thing. It's definitely one of the largest, as I said. It's I know I can't get an eye on what the total budget is, but their last 2 contracts that they awarded were for just tools or parts of it, and they were like 80 and 90 million respectively, 2 separate contracts. So people who work in this, very, very big money. The next one is virtual parachute training. It's been around for a while. It's kind of the de facto training for parachutes. I don't have any metrics on what the return on investment is, but it's pretty obvious that it's used in training for people for disaster scenarios, entanglements. They need to get out, ejection, things like that. I guess I've never jumped in a parachute, but one of the problems they have is you're overwhelmed by the senses of jumping out of the airplane, and you don't, know, and you get overwhelmed by it. By using these systems, they can get you what they call a muscle memory. So in certain situations just where to grab to pull your line. And this is used, 300 systems are used around the world now. So it's used in military. If you go to jump schools, you'll start to see these now as well. You'll go through this first before they actually take you up to jump. And that's a situation where the training makes sense that, I can't have you die right in the training. And this was implemented. They had a spike in deaths from parachute jumping in 2015. This is when the military first started to implement this, and they see a dramatic reduction in those deaths. The next one lower right there is lower left is a very cool one called Street Smarts VR. And it was started out with the US Air Force for military police scenario training. Again, you can put a person in a classroom, you can do, train them all that stuff, but when you put them out in the real world, with all kinds of stimulus, they tend to, they need a training where, it's environment based or stimulus based. And so in this one, they've trained 6,000 police officers so far with it. In going through this course, they're able to reduce the course by 40 hours. And that ends up saving about $350,000 a year on that. And this is just for the Air Force. It will slowly get branching out. Imagine you'll start to see this in local police forces as well. So this type of scenario training where you can't put a person, firefighting, safety, things like that. This VR is a very good use for that. The last one here is the use of VR for marketing. And in this case, the marketing is recruitment for the Navy. And they have I've actually seen this one, it's pretty cool. It's a truck that they drive around. It'll show up at NASCAR events or, big football games. And, young kids will come in and they'll learn about the Navy, and the things that were kind of impressive with this is that after they introduced this, in the 2 months that they had introduced this VR, and what it is, it's a SEAL extraction. You along with 3 other people, you put this rumble vest on, and you put I think it's an HTC Vive headset on, and then you're in this riverine scenario where you're going to go in and extract out some people, and there's gunfire and all that kind of stuff. The impressive metrics from it, in the 2 months that they introduced this, they had doubled the amount of leads, people who are, I'm interested in joining, had double the leads from what they had the 2 years prior. It was a tremendous increase. The other thing I thought was kind of interesting in the surveys is that 20% of the people who, in taking the survey, they said, I'm not interested in the US Navy, going into the Navy, I just want to play the game. 20% of the people who had said that changed their mind after taking the VR and contact the Navy about potentially joining. So if you look at these, you're also seeing other ones in the Navy, in the Air Force. There's some helicopter ones. So the other branches that are in recruiting have picked up on this and are all creating now VR simulations that show what it's like, to be, what's it going to be like when you join. Now, I want to just quickly show you something that, because the military applications of VR are some of the biggest grants and money and stuff that's in there. If you're interested, here's how you find these. If you're not familiar with it, the website is called sam.gov. I'm going to go ahead and just click on it now. And don't worry about this front page here. Sam.gov is a centralized US government website for all kinds of stuff, but the one we're interested here is contract opportunities. So I just click on contract opportunities, and it'll pull up. There's a real science to searching in this. You can hire people that will go in here. I'm doing it in a very crude way, but I'm just going to type in virtual. Let's type in virtual reality. So it's going to pull up all the current contracts that are out there across the federal government for VR work. The government does not procure their own equipment, so you'll see a lot of ones in here where they're looking for you to procure headsets for them. They may have a existing VR course and they want to now purchase the equipment for it. So this might be for 10 Oculus Quest 2 headsets, and they want it coming with manuals on how to use and the rest of that. So there's a lot of those in here. Here's one that's virtual reality crane. I looked at this ahead of time, and this is one where it's a virtual reality crane. And here's how you go down through these. It'll tell you it's a Department of Defense notice. I always like to look down at the classifications right here. Small business set-asides. I think almost all of us are small businesses. So you get a preference on the contract. If you bid on this and Boeing bids on it and you're comparable, you get the bid, not Boeing. And here's the description. I'm going to come down to just the very end here. Contractor. So they're looking for training, software and hardware, VR training to train people on what's called a Grove crane. It's like 100-ton mid-level crane. They need to train 10 people, 10 personnel. And so they get down, they're looking for contractors to provide all required hardware, a desktop platform, crane controls, VR headset, and other. So, I mean, it could be that you could go to this place, you could do 360 video of the crane operating. So you put together a proposal for how you would meet this contract. And you just continue down, it tells you what you need to put in here and stuff. But this is how you search amongst federal contracts for work, for virtual reality work. I could have gone in here and done augmented reality, would be another one, but virtual welder, that's another training one. Here's an augmented reality weapons system simulator. Now, arguably, a lot of these are very large projects that probably are outside the scope of something that us as individual, content creators could do. But we're kind of rare in that we have the specialized skills. The people that probably will win this or will bid on this contract are existing education firms or existing, suppliers to the Department of Defense that aren't experts in virtual and augmented reality. And a lot of times you can find out who is bidding on this contract and then contact them directly and say, I'm a VR XR specialist. Can I participate in your bid? And you might get work that way. So let me go. I'm going to quickly try to wrap up here so I don't spend too much time. So the Google Maps platform, obviously a very successful use of virtual reality that we're all familiar with. And I just want to show you, if you're not familiar, there's been some very recent changes to it that I want to go over. I'll start at the bottom here, the Street View Studio. So the Street View app on the phone is no longer supported. It was discontinued in March 2023. You can, but here I think was where is an opportunity for us. They introduced Street View Studio, which allows you to embed 360 videos into a Google business profile. I haven't done that yet, but I imagine there's some interesting cases for that suppose you're looking at an event space, a wedding space. And previously I would have taken some 360 photos of the place, but there wouldn't have been any people in it, right? Because I didn't want to stitch it and stuff. But maybe I go to the event space and hit them up where I'm going to come in and take a 360 video at some wedding, the highlight of it, and we'll edit it all out. And then that 360 video is loaded on their Google business profile. That's a lot more powerful, that 360 video. And this is brand new. So I don't think that there's a lot of people out doing it. We'll eventually get into 360 video in one of our webinars. But if you're doing 360 video, this has got to be a business case where you can go to a dance studio, a theater, things like that, and show an actual live 360 performance. I'm not sure how they're handling such large files and stuff, but click on the Google Street View, the link that I have right here. It'll take you to it, and it talks all about it. The static 360 stills that you used to embed on your phone with the Street View app, you can still just embed it into Google Maps. But there is one caveat, and I'm not quite sure. I do a little bit more research, but apparently in the old Street View app, well, I knew this was the case. You're out in the middle of a forest, you take a beautiful panorama next to some unnamed waterfall, and you could embed it on Google Maps at that point. But I think with the new Google Maps, the way that they're doing it, you could only embed that new photo to a location, to an existing location, and it's not necessarily pinned at the coordinates that you want. So check on that. I'm not really sure about that. That's the case. That's not going to be very useful. Two other ones that I just wanted to talk to you about, and I think these definitely have business opportunities for us. There's some positive things that can be done with these. They're brand new, so there's not a lot of people using them yet. The first is photorealistic 3D tiles. And if you've seen, it's only in about 2,000 cities or certain areas, but it gives you access to a very high resolution. Let me go ahead and click on it. I'll just pull it up. Very high resolution meshes of cities. Oh, I don't think I have. Okay, I tried to give you links that would, rather than being a showcase, they would get you started. So if you were interested in how to create, how to use these 3D photorealistic tiles, the link would take you there, not necessarily to an example of it. But when we create our virtual tours and we create either a dollhouse view or a map, you can now use an API and you can pull in a very high resolution 3D mesh of where you're at and use it in your tour. You'll see when you click on this that the resolution, the map is pretty nice, to the level actually that you can render aerial flyovers of a city or of a building rather than having to hire somebody to have a drone come out and film it. It's not as good as a drone, but you can go in using this, it's called Aerial Flyover API, and you can specify where you want a camera to travel, send that off to Google, and then they will render it and send you back a video flyby of this location. It's all free. So it's a way in which you could add virtual tours or aerial flyovers of your locations without having to mess with a drone or even pay for it. The other one, which I think is, so back to that, if you're creating virtual tours and you want to have a map where you're creating virtual tours that are spread out over a geographic area, take a look at this photorealistic 3D tile API. You're able to create very nice looking and in customized. You can see it there where it's got icons on the map of Manhattan. So that's definitely something to look at if you're doing virtual tours where you have maps in them. The other one, which I think augmented reality, and this is in concert with the AR core, it's kind of cool, is that you pull up a Google Maps and you can place AR objects in the real world at a specific point, a specific location, and business cases for this. And I think if you click on this one, it takes you to, it might have, I think it has some business cases in here where, yeah, here's one where they did this in Japan. Singapore has done it where a business will hire a 3D artist to come in and augment the outside of their building or some event with all of this augmented objects. These objects are placed in the real world using this geo, and it's kind of showing you how they're doing it here. If you can see the image right here, and that's kind of showing you the 3D tiling, but they're able to go in and for a marketing campaign, they can build out an augmented storefront to this. People who come through with their phone can pull it up and look at it. So kind of an interesting use of it, but that's called Geospatial Creator. Take a look at that. It's kind of a fun one to play with. And then I think, yeah, that was it. I'm ending about 5 minutes early. But I want to go ahead and open it now up to any questions that people might have. I know it was kind of a very broad survey of it. There is so many applications to this. I guess I would just finish with, in looking through all of these applications and looking at the effectiveness of them, the return on the investment, it was pretty clear that if you're trying to use VR to replace some existing training or education, and there's not a compelling use for using VR, it's not a spatial issue or whatever, you're not going to get an increased effectiveness, not to the level that it's going to justify paying for the virtual reality. Virtual reality is almost always more expensive. So virtual reality for education or experiences or uses, they're spatial or they're safety related, but it's not a end all be all. We're not going to replace education with virtual reality. There are some significant issues to it, the digital equity that I talked about, but also it's not for everybody. About 20% of the population will get motion sickness, just like 20% of the population will get seasickness. So I think the approach, when you look at the Navy and that synthetic training environment, the approach they're taking is really that. I mean, they spent a lot of money on it, and a lot of thought about what they're doing. And so reading through those documents for the synthetic training environment and what is the point, how are they using virtual reality? Those are some really excellent documents that ground you on what VR is really useful for, because it's not, if you think VR is for everything, it isn't. And there's a lot of the use cases where they went with VR, but it wasn't a compelling case, was the words you hear all the time, a compelling case for it. So anyway, I'll stop with that and kind of open it up to people if you have any questions on things.
First of all, Lauren, if you could repost the link to the PDF.
Sure. I'm not posting it as a link. I'm just dumping it into the chat.
Ah, okay.
So if you go to look in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and throw it up there again.
People who come, yeah.
Throw it up there again. Yeah, definitely download the brief, because the links that are in there take you to pretty nice resources. If you're interested in any of the things that I talked about in this presentation, just click on the link and they'll take you on your way.
Okay, and then if people want to raise a hand, and I can then just open up their mic for them and you can ask a question verbally rather than type it, that would work fine.
I see one from Tom. Has Tom gotten did he get the PDF? Okay.
So in your research, did you see new applications for real estate? Or do you see remaining in the design previs for architectural world, knowing that you'll talk about digital twins next year?
I didn't do too much research into the real estate. I got the impression that the real estate is a very cutthroat industry. It's kind of a race to, it seems like the people, they just get a Ricoh camera and they just go out and they're charging maybe $300 to do an entire house. It's not a very profitable business. At least it didn't look to me to be profitable. And I'm not really sure not really sure about that one. I tried to find what are some of the larger companies that do Street View. Are they profitable at it? Are there large companies that do real estate? And it seemed like people in real estate were just starting to do it themselves. If you're a real estate agent and you want a virtual tour, or somebody with a Matterport's coming in and doing it for so cheap that you can't really compete with it.
Except for in very high-end properties.
Very high-end properties, yeah. And then when you get into really high-end properties and architectural photography, then you get with people that, they're expecting you to show up with like true architectural photography. If you're taking something for Better Homes and Garden, the amount of work they do, they pull all the light bulbs out, they put new light, all the same light. I mean, it's really complex. And if you show up with just some VR camera and you're like, took a picture and you walk out, I don't think that they would. I don't know.
Well, in real estate, it's like with everything else, it's a whole range. There are, I know a few real estate agents. Some of them despise 360 and Matterport. They think people just want to blast through the listings and don't want to bother with a virtual tour. And others swear by them. So, it's the whole range. Also depends upon your geographic area. I have a friend in Phoenix who produces 360 tours of housing down there, and he's doing fairly well. Up here in Milwaukee, you've got some Matterport people, but it's a rarity. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I was in LA, I was able to get some business doing, and it was fun. It's quick business. But I was finding that there's a few companies that just kind of seem to dominate the market. But honestly, I've never really tried to pitch it to people to go, and I think that would be an interesting thing, maybe with the 360 video, because that's a little bit different, but to pitch it to come up with a good pitch and come to event spaces and places like that. The under the Google Street View thing, I had, it takes you to the link where they have some metrics that if you add a 360 tour, you have a 40% increase in your search results and things like that.
Okay, for one person would like now to have that PDF reposted again because he wasn't on a PC when it was earlier, so he'd like to be able to download that.
Okay.
For those who didn't hear earlier, this is being recorded. It will be available on the IVRPA website in the members only webinar section. One thing we've decided is that these live webinars will remain open to the entire VRXR community for free. But if you want to watch the presentation on demand, you need to be an IVRPA member to do that. It's really very cost effective. $50 for professional membership, and then it opens up a much larger library of past webinars, other presentations. So that's worthwhile, and it's worthwhile being part of the community of creatives in this field. And I encourage you all to do that, those of you who are not yet IVRPA members. Oh, Lauren, would you please just quickly share the submarine training thing that you had mentioned at a board meeting, how it proved so effective that.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah, we were when I was working for the Navy about 4 or 5 years ago, we were starting to introduce virtual reality to our training, and I was in charge of the submarine weapon systems, so the horizontal, vertical launchers, things like that, torpedo tubes and things. And I was also responsible for the training on that, the crew training, the manuals and stuff. And we were having a bit of an issue where we were seeing increasing incidences, accidents and things like that were attributed to, poor training. But the training wasn't the issue. The courses hadn't changed. What was changing was the students, and they were becoming more multitasking, spatially orientated, just, the new kids coming up. And the linear PDF, sitting in a classroom and turning pages of a book it was losing its effectiveness on them. They didn't have the attention span for that anymore. We needed to change our technology. So we started looking at virtual reality. And the one area that we were most interested in is what they call situational awareness or casualty training. You're on a sub somewhere in it, and an alarm goes off. Flooding or a reactor issue or a fire. You need to do something. You need to go somewhere. You need to pick something up. You have a spatial decision to make. And when we went through and created this high resolution virtual tour of the submarine, very simple tour where we would put you in a place, you'd have a headset on, and we would, boom, you'd hear a sort of alarm, and you had to, in that space, go do something. And a submarine will have 2 crews. They'll have a gold and a blue crew. They rotate, when the boat's out for 6 months, the other crew's back. So you have these 2 crews. So we had the opportunity to take the 2 crews, and the one crew we left in its standard training. The other crew we took and just put this little headset on them and ran them through a couple scenarios, the crew. And the impact because you eventually get them onto a submarine, and time on a submarine is super expensive. It's not something you want to do. So you get the crew on the submarine and you're going through this training, and it was such a profound difference. The people who had gone through the VR course, the spatial stuff, almost every single one of them, as if they just knew what they were doing in the scenario. I mean, on the ship, they would boom, they were off doing it. The people who had been in the PDF, who had gone and looked at diagrams, like, oh, here's a diagram of the boat, you need to go here. They were confused. And that was a point at which they started to really get interested in virtual and augmented reality. And now for the Navy, if you're interested, it's primarily out of a lab called the Battle Space Exploitation of Mixed Reality Lab, or the Beamer Lab. And the interesting thing about DoD work or military work or federal, because not just military, it's libraries and stuff like that. The interesting part about that is that because this industry is driven by the entertainment industry, Hollywood, gaming, unlike most disciplines, the military is behind. The military does not have the most cutting edge displays and software and everything else. And they've decided that they're not going to compete with it. So the Navy military is going after what they refer to as COTS solutions, COTS. It's a really big word, and it means common off-the-shelf solutions. And what that means is when you see a call for VR or augmented education, they're looking for a Quest, an HTC Vive. They're not looking for you to develop some high-end headset, because they're not doing that. They're relying on you purchasing and using commercially available equipment. So it's a good opportunity for you. You're the expert in a field that people are increasingly wanting to adopt. So it's a good place to be. Any other questions? I'm seeing the VR headset, the immersion is a big deal. And also we're making the field of view, we're making some tremendous advancements in displays, in curved, semi-transparent. So it's a promising time. We're going to see some big products coming out pretty soon.
Todd mentioned about the upcoming IVRPA board elections. Thanks, Todd. I should have mentioned that earlier. There are 5 seats open on the IVRPA board for people to become a member of the board. We have a number of current board members whose time is up, who are going to also go back into, or are going to put their name back into the elections. But it's open to the entire community of members. You need to be a member to be on the board or to vote for someone on the board. I have to say, I was on the board back like 2012, 2013. It was a very active board, very involved. I found that it was a great way to develop connections, to learn so many things, because you have a number of people who are expert in the field bringing their own individual expertise into just casual conversations that you might have while being part of a board meeting or in other interactions. That's a very worthwhile endeavor as well. We are in process of building an exciting new website. And that right now is eating up a lot of time. We are really, really wanting to bring the live conferences back again next year and have some exciting possible announcements coming up about that. And that will involve a lot of effort by board members. We are also looking for people who might want to say, I really don't want to commit to a board position, but I would like to be able to contribute on a committee to perform some sort of task. You might, for instance, be expert in developing websites, especially WordPress-oriented websites, and just want to be part of that effort. You can definitely be part of that, and just that, and then you don't participate in other things. Definitely for the conference, we'll be needing the help of a number of other people who want to be part of that. So there's a number of ways to participate beyond just being part of the board. If you are a current member, you should have received the call for candidates, and that has all the information in it. It has the links to the where you can post. Also, this, if I didn't put it up yet on the our Facebook group. It'll be going up probably today. And then you just post your candidate's statement in a special section on the current IVRPA website. And then come, I think it's December 4th, we'll start the actual voting. And before Christmas, we'll have the new board members selected. So those of you who want to participate on a more intimate level, I would strongly encourage you to do so. It really is a very good group of people that we have now, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm very, very pleased to be part of the group. Okay, so let's see, what else?
We had a question on 360 video about Tom was asking about, he has a Insta360 Pro too, was asking, he's thinking of selling and asking it, should I give it a shot? And I would say yes. I would say try to pitch it to some local, again, something that's a spatial, so a concert hall, a theater, a wedding venue, where you could take a 360 video short one that would convey the space probably a lot better than just some static image. And that might be an interesting, you might get somebody that would say, yeah, come in and take a 360 video. I used to own the InstaPro, the first one. And if you could get a business where people are like, yeah, take a 360 video, throw it up to my, Google business profile, $500, $1,000, whatever. That's a pretty simple job to do, to just show up at some event that's already been staged. You take a couple minutes of 360 video, you process it, chop it, throw it up onto Studio and charge them, like you're a wedding photographer or something. So yeah, I'd give that a shot, see if that works. If that works, I'll come work for you.
That's one way to do it. Actually, every time I've done 360 video, I've been amazed at how different it is than doing regular straight video. You just have to think so differently.
It's a different, yeah. I'm not a video person. I know enough about video to know that I'm not a video person.
In any case, the Pro camera, the Insta360 Pro, I found is good for stereo situations. And that means viewing in a headset. And when you get to use it for that, it's a very powerful presentation. So you can find use cases for a stereo application, that might be good. And it might be good, for instance, let's say you have a custom home builder and they're at a one of these home building expos or something like that. And if they can pop a headset onto somebody so that they're able to show in virtual reality what the home spaces are like that they create, that's a very powerful selling tool. In one case, I had a situation where an organization wanted to take potential funders on a virtual tour of a space that was difficult to get them in. So they were able to do that with the virtual reality. And then they can take the virtual reality experience to these funders, put a headset on them, and have a very powerful presentation. If it's just 360 video, I found that a number of the other small 8K cameras are so much easier to work with than the Pro camera. But of course, they can't do stereo. So
yeah, I tried to use that Insta camera I had the idea of recording concerts. I was going to do local concerts in bars and things, and you record them in 360 and then run them live, and it all worked out except for one problem: the sound. You take that 360 camera and you take it to a venue, to a bar or something like that. And I learned a lot about sound. The soundboard, the sound is being manipulated or controlled for that space. You can't record that on a camera and then play it back. It's blown out. It's a mess. You can't tap into the soundboard and pull sound off of theirs. So I ended up with really cool 360 video with horrific sound. stereoscopic, muddled sound. And that wasn't I'm not a sound person, and I just like this is outside of my expertise.
You have to use you absolutely have to use a separate sound recording tool. And like put your well, I have an H2 that can do stereo, but there's specific I guess the Zoom
Zoom, yeah, the Zoom one,
which are meant for VR. And you just plop that on top of the camera in the case of like the Pro, and it then records very high quality spatial audio. But no, you cannot use the.
Yeah, I was using a Zoom, but it wouldn't give me. It's a directional, so it would be a 90 or 120 degree. It wasn't
have to have the right.
stereo.
You have to have the right recorder.
Was the stereoscopic, is that what that's referred to when they have this sound that's as you move your head and everything else, and that makes a big difference. If you put a headset on and you're in a concert and you turn your head, you're expecting the sound to change, and if it doesn't, it's kind of weird to be in that. It's not an accurate representation of it. But that's an area to look at. I know that there's been a lot of work during COVID. They had some successful bands that they took their studio and they arranged the people in a circle, and they placed a 360 camera in the center. I think Foo Fighters was one who did it the best, and they were selling, because they couldn't do concerts during COVID, and they were selling access to their studio practice sessions, where you would have a headset and you'd be sitting there jamming with the Foo Fighters, and as you looked around, they would each be in a different. They were arranged around you in a circle, so that was a pretty cool case. But again, sound and video are fields where they become experts in it, and you can't expect to, I'm just going to go record some sound today. That doesn't work that way.
Yeah. In the case of 360 video, we do have several webinars, we hope, coming up next year. We have one that will be specifically directed towards storytelling in VR. And if we get the guy that we want for that, I mean, he's worked on major BBC presentations in VR and others, and has been in award-nominated films. There's also then just production. How do you produce a 360 video? I mean, you can do it ultra simple with your your X3 on a selfie stick and just walk around, or you can have something that is really powerful, but you have to know how to produce it, which again is just so different than traditional video. And then producing it well, so it's really effective, takes it past the, oh, cool, this is 360 video, to this is a really worthwhile endeavor. So, we're looking forward to those presentations next year, and I hope we'll see many of you guys around. Let's see. Question was how to stay in touch with us. Well, I mean, if you're a member, you definitely can stay in touch on the Facebook group, for instance. You can join the IVRPA Facebook group and participate there. At these webinars, you can definitely come in. Lauren has put up his contact information. On the
write me an email. Got any questions about anything I've covered today? I like to respond to emails. So
on the IVRPA website, all the board members are listed with contact information. So feel free to contact any of us there. If there's something else beyond that you're thinking of, Emily, let me know, and I'll try to answer that.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions or comments that anyone might have?
All right, and you're welcome to everybody that's appreciated the presentation. It's my pleasure. It's as Scott said, I enjoy being in this group. It's fun to share, and I'm learning a lot too. I come like this morning we had a nice conversation about like that's discontinued. They don't use it anymore. I'm like, no, that's actually they do. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good to know. Yeah, it's really nice. I mean, it's just such a new. There's not really a lot of books to pull up, so you have to rely on the expertise of your peers. It's it's a collective. It's like a guild or something, and I kind of like that. I've always gotten a lot more information. I'm looking forward to one of the conferences again. Those have been, these conferences that they have, or we have, I guess now, because I'm on the board, tremendous jumps in my timeline of capabilities. That those conferences are a big step up. There's just nothing like meeting with other people and sitting down and going over things. So anyway, thank you, everybody. I think we're to the end, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Okay. Thanks, people.
And have a good holiday.
And look out for the presentations. You'll get a mailing to it. If you're on our email list, you'll see that. Otherwise, you'll see it in some of the other Facebook groups, and look forward to seeing you guys at future webinars.
Right. Thank you, everybody.